All right, guys. I'm Jacob here with Ross today. And so I wanted to talk to you about Crucible. Now, Crucible is potentially closing. It's looking like it's going to go in that direction. And I think that this could mean a lot for knife makers and the knife industry as a whole. Now, Ross, your brand is Dry Creek Forge. Now, you use Crucible steels probably semi-regularly, but you're not dependent on Crucible, right?
No.
So that would be a kind of a specialty thing for you.
Yeah, I do. I really like the high-end steels and stuff, but I mean, it's just kind of. I do a lot of wood stuff, and there are certain applications that stuff's good for. And then, I mean, especially people using skinners and things like that, they want more wear resistance and stuff. I mean, that's good. It's good for that too. But there's also a few things that are, require a lot of toughness and edge holding. And that's where you have to go into the expensive, like CPM steels and things. So, like, I use it somewhat, but not all the time. There are a lot of guys, though, that are, using that stuff exclusively. That's going to throw a wrench in their plans, though.
So with that being said, my knife brand is Exodus Knife and Tool. Up until recently, we've exclusively used CPM steels. My knives are manufactured by White River Knife and Tool, and this video is made possible through sales of my knives. That link will be in the description box below. And Ross, a link to your brand will be in the description box below. That's Dry Creek Forge. And how would you, define what your brand is or what it is that you're selling to people?
I mean, most of my knives are basically, woodland knives, survival knives. I do a lot of skinners and EDC type stuff too as well, but I cater mostly to people that are gonna go out in the woods and use their stuff. I do some EDC stuff, but mostly, hard use woods knives and things like that. I really enjoy getting out there and beating on stuff and using them, not necessarily bushcraft stuff. I do a little bit of that, but I just like going out in the woods and outdoors and using, wood tools. So that's kind of what I make.
So those links will be in the description box below, guys. Please check this out. So Crucible is a steel with a long and historically relevant past. I started looking into the history of Crucible a bit, actually, when I was looking into D.B. Cooper. So D.B. Cooper stole a whole bunch of money, hijacked a plane, jumped out with a parachute in Washington State, and disappeared. And his tie was found with a sliver of titanium on it from a metallurgist who worked at Crucible. I started learning about the history of Crucible through this, and I was disappointed to find that the Crucible that we have today is not the same business that was then. It had been bought out. I couldn't find anybody to do a podcast with me about that because I thought it was super cool. But I say that to say that we may see some bit of a restructuring with Crucible going forward if that's how this works. But the Crucible as we know it today, I think focused more on the knife industry and on pushing knife metals and knife metal technologies than anybody else ever has. When would you say, do you think that really started? Maybe the 2005, around that or something?
Yeah, I think that Crucible, I may be wrong with the dates. They filed bankruptcy in the early 2000s, maybe 2005 or 6, somewhere in there. I think after that restructuring, they kind of came back, and I mean, they did do some stuff as far as knife steels go. I think they worked with 3V a little bit in the late 90s, but they didn't really focus on that. I think when they restructured, they really tried to put their best foot forward as far as the knife industry goes and dive into that more so. Because I mean, like they are at the forefront as far as knife steels go, or CPM knife steels. Some of the other companies have a few things, but I mean they're the big dog, in this pack.
So what I think was unique about what Crucible did there is people don't realize this, but there are a lot worldwide. There are a lot of knife smelting factories, I don't know if that's the right term, a lot of places that make steel, a lot of places that make metal. And although as knife nerds, we might personally feel like, I was just looking at that, we feel like knives are big business, the reality is when it comes to manufacturing steels, we're a very, very small part of any industry. So with knives as a whole exploding in popularity, both I would say separately between Les Stroud and Survivor Man era, simultaneously with a push into the military with tactical knives and Iraq, the invasion of Iraq and stuff, or somewhere around the same time, I think we saw the knife industry explode. And we saw Crucible, I think, kind of lead the charge in making very high-end knife steels available. And I think because they did that, a lot of other manufacturers started offering knife steels as well, maybe even as a Cold War. Sandvik and Bowler and Carpenter even was involved a little bit. And so we see this, but I think Crucible, though, I think they were the ones pushing it. So Bowler comes out with new steels, especially now at this point, and it's cool. But usually it seems to me like Crucible dropped a new steel and then Bowler responded. And so that was unique. That was unique to this time frame, and I don't know if we will retain that with their closing, but I think that's why this closing is important, and I want to talk about it. Now, Ross, I feel like, and I think maybe we've talked about this a little bit, I feel like knife making in the knife industry has potentially become, at this point, oversaturated. Do you think that has, how do you think that that's going to play into, possibly Crucible's closing or whatever else right now?
Well, I mean, I think that we've talked about this before. I think that a lot of makers, maybe handmade makers, are going to fall off during this period because it coincides with the economy getting a little bit worse too. But also, I mean, there's going to be a lot of guys that, go to different types of steels, lower end steels or whatever to compensate for this because it's just availability is going to be bad for a while. So some people, their entire brand depends on CPM steels. So unless they switch over to something else, like we talked about Carpenter really wasn't friendly to the knife makers. I mean, XHP, for example, was pretty popular when Cold Steel took it, and they just basically refused to make enough for everybody to meet the demand. So unless somebody steps up and picks up this big, huge gap that's going to be left behind by them, I think there's either going to be a lot of makers that stop making CPM stuff or stop making high-end steels and go to something else, or they're just going to completely stop anyways. Because I think with the popularity of TV shows like Forged in Fire going off and things like that, there's going to be a lot less interest, and there's going to be a lot of people sticking in that were hardcore to begin with. And there's going to be a lot of the hobbyists that just got into this because it was a fad that are going to fall off, especially knife makers and knife buyers. So, like he said, this market for CPM stuff, it might seem big to us, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a small drop in the water compared to the amount of other steels that company probably makes. So, just depending on how the industry stays, there may be other people that grab the torch and pick it up, other companies, but I don't know. To me, we'll just have to wait and see. I think there's a few companies that are poised to, take it and take off, but we'll just have to wait and see. They may stick around, they may restructure and still have a presence in the community. I don't know.
Which would probably be for the best.
Yeah. Nobody wants to see them go down. I mean, obviously, but because they make good stuff. They had they've been the standard as far as 3V is everywhere. S35VN has been everywhere. Every base model knife that you got from a store or from a main manufacturer was like either S35 or S30, or I mean standard stainlesses is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
A lot of the companies in the United States have stayed with their old faithfuls, like the survival type knives, which are 1095 and 5160. Those are going to stick around. They're not going to go anywhere. But these other companies are just going to have to find alternatives. I hope that Crucible stays around, but somebody else is going to have to pick up the torch, like I said.
So already Bob Shabala,
I'm not sure what his name is. Yeah.
Shabalaba?
Yeah.
Dang it. So Niagara Specialty Metals has reached out to a few different plants, Carpenter being one of them. If you didn't know, Carpenter is important due to military contracts making the steels for bolt carriers for our M4s and stuff like that. So Carpenter's a huge company, but again, they're doing this big government contract size stuff, and up until this point, producing their knife steels must not have been profitable for them or make sense for them because they don't really do it. But he's reached out to a few of these companies to make the knife steel recipes that we've come to know and love from a few other sources to keep stuff moving, because for the custom maker like Ross, and not so much me, this might not be a huge deal, but think about White River knife and tool.
White River, like
even Benchmade at this point, like you were talking about some tried and true steels.
Well, S30V, everything they make is S30V. That's the baseline. I mean, and then they go up from there. Like all the Benchmade bug outs, that's like one of their most popular models. All that stuff starts out at S30, and that's all CPM stuff.
Even Spyderco obviously does a lot of everything, but they'll do a lot of Carpenter steels. Even Kershaw and ZT.
There's S30, yeah.
I would say that we have come to a point in the industry. We moved away from 440C being the standard, and I would say we moved from 440C at some point to 154 CM. And I'd say we were just getting to a point where we were completely kind of done with 154 CM, and I think S35 VN was pretty much becoming a knife industry standard for a quality knife or folder, even on more affordable stuff, and that was all Crucible. And so it might even be harder on some of these production companies than it is for custom makers. Because at the end of the day, a custom maker is a good knife maker, probably knows that edge geometry cuts and edge geometry makes toughness. And so if somebody, a knife maker really, really, really loves using CPM 3V, but they have to switch over to 52-100 or a similar steel, they're probably going to be able to make that transition pretty well. And the end user, even if they have to pay the same amount due to inflation or availability or whatever else, the end user probably will not be disappointed. However, I don't know, where would our U.S. manufacturers go? I guess to Carpenter, if Carpenter really started putting out the numbers. But here's my thing. If we could move to these, in my opinion, if we could move to these other manufacturers and make the same steels for these other manufacturers and have the same availability and the same prices, those manufacturers would already be doing it. This is already a lower priority for them, so they might fill these orders, but things are probably going to take longer. We'll probably have less options on sizes and thicknesses, and I would just have to assume that prices are going to be more expensive, right?
Yeah, but I mean, there's such a huge gap in the market. I mean, that Crucible has had like this huge hold on the market that when this falls out, like if there's going to be somebody that could step up and match that production, they could have the entire industry in their hand, just like Crucible did. But I mean, it just depends on if anybody's set up to be able to handle that.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
And we already said that we don't want to see anything bad happen to Crucible. I absolutely do not. I would love to see Crucible find a way to restructure or find a U.S. investor or to do something and continue the status quo. We just got MagnaCut, designed by Laren Thomas. That's fantastic. I saw something teased about a prototype for MagnaWare through Bradford recently. Like we might get a Laren Thomas based Magna family of knives. That would be great. That would be cool. I think that this is cool. But one thing that I've talked about and that Ross and I are working on together, we're working with Zap, not working with, but we're testing Zap steels. And I'm wanting, and maybe Ross also, I'm wanting to use Zap Steel Z-Tough, Z-Finite, Z-Wear. These steels used to be hyper exotic. And if Crucible if something does happen to Crucible to create this big vacuum, it would be cool for those really exotic steels to become more mainstream and affordable and available in prices. And already we're seeing that change for Zap. They just built a new factory here in the U.S., so it's already getting better, but maybe it's their time to shine with that because these other companies, Carpenter and these other guys, they're here, they're already existing, but they're not focusing on blade steels on their own, whereas Zap is with their new blade quality steels. We've got Z-Tough BQ here that we are going to pound on. I'm super excited about that.
And everything that I've used from Zap and from Carpenter has been excellent quality steel. I mean, like there's no question that they make good stuff. So
right.
Like if you guys see this and you think that, like I've never heard of that or it's not any good, I mean, they make really nice steel, and they make the choices that they have are excellent steels as well. And they have focused on mainly improving a version of something that we already have existing, like CD1 and Z-Tough are similar. They're kind of similar to 1V, yeah. They all have a little bit of variance as far as like what they're geared towards, which one's got a little bit better edge holding or whatever, or toughness, like it's a little different. But most of those are in the same category. And then like 3V, they have an equivalent. Zap has something that's equivalent to that or something. They have Z-Wear, which is crew wear. I mean, and everything that they make is quality. Like a Carpenter's the same. They've got different, how there's 20 CV, that's, and then they've got
M390.
M390, that's
From
Boulder, yeah. I mean,
Boulder, good stuff.
There's not going to be, if they go away, there's not going to be a gap for a performance steel in that position. Like there's going to be something available for that. It's just going to be like, the availability of those things might go away. So like especially for custom makers, if you're going to try to get a knife in 3V, it's super easy. 3V is so prevalent now because all these manufacturers have started using it. Same thing for MagnaCut. MagnaCut was high at the beginning because of the demand. You couldn't get it very many places. Like all these things really have to have a demand from these large manufacturers before they're easy to get for us. So it might be harder to get specialty stuff in the coming months or years or whatever happens to them. We're going to find out, but there won't be a lack of, or there won't be a vacuum of, or a space that's not filled already by these other companies. It might just cost more, or it might be harder to get. So and eventually, like what he said, if they were to pick those up, they'll go down, but they all make really good stuff, and you guys should be looking forward to and looking into some of these other companies as well.
And these other steels.
Yes.
Now, if, Crucible putting their money on the knife industry and having difficulty now, if that is indicative of the knife industry as a whole having a bit of a challenge right now. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out, because I guarantee you, no matter what anybody does with ordering from these other companies like Carpenter or whatever else, if the demand is waning and the money isn't there, the supply dries up, the cost goes up. And so I do think, when I first started getting into more custom knives, before I deployed around 2009, I picked up a Tops dart, and it was like $350 with an awful sheath. And at that time, I feel like if you wanted a really nice custom knife, first off, it came without a sheath. So we're so spoiled right now with custom knives, and we expect it to come with a sheath, so when it comes in the mail, we can start using it immediately, right? That's not how it always was. When you bought a custom knife, you got a custom knife. If the maker supplied it with a sheath, that was a pretty big bonus, but it probably wouldn't be a really awesome sheath. And a lot of makers, custom knife makers, work with custom sheath makers and would say, if you would like, I can send your custom knife to a custom sheath maker who can then send it to you immediately. But I remember, back in 2009, the US dollar had some value. I'd say $350 then. Right now, if you go onto one of my favorite knife retailers, let's say Blade HQ or Knives Ship Free or one of these companies, I'm not saying anything bad about any of them, but the market itself, I just saw an Emerson little pocket folder for sale for $400. And what else did I see selling for $400? And Benchmade's going for $400 and plus.
Well, I mean, when the bug out first came out, wasn't it close to like $120, $130? Now they're $180. That's been within 4 or 5 years, right? That's a large margin of price difference there.
So if we've got costs coming up, inflation coming up, the cost of labor coming up, the cost of doing business coming up, if demand goes down, I think we might go back to pre-2008 market where a custom knife was an expensive thing. There weren't a lot of people doing it because you have to invest a ton of money to be a custom knife maker. And the ones that exist have long wait lists and cost a lot of money. And knives comparably costed a lot of money. I was telling people, I've done a couple of videos within the past couple of years saying we're in the golden era right now where you can buy a knife in MagnaCut with a heat treat that is so good that knife's performance as a production knife would eclipse anything you could buy custom from 20 years earlier, anything in the entire world at any price. And you could go down and you can buy it for like $200. It's wild. I think we might take a bit of a step back from that if demand wanes. I think Forged and Fire is done. Knife or Death, I think, was kind of short-lived. That was cool, but and I don't know. I guess Alone and Naked and Afraid are still going. Do you think that they're as big as they used to be? I don't really know.
I don't know if Alone is as big as it was either, or even Naked Afraid. But personally, I don't follow them as close as a lot of people would. But I think that after the first, I think Alone's way more popular. I may be wrong, and Naked and Afraid's got a lot of fans. But I don't think the knife culture behind those shows is really as big as it was at one time. So. Because there's a lot of people, at one time, I remember as a maker, if you got your knife on Naked and Afraid, they didn't have to say anything about it or anything. You'd have people asking questions and finding out who made it and stuff now. But, no, I don't know if anybody really cares anymore, honestly. It's oversaturated, too. There's so much stuff that's like that. It's not as interesting as it once was. And the survival culture, too. I think the bushcraft and survival stuff really hit, like he said, a golden era in the 2013 and, in the teens era there. Well, once we got to COVID, everything just kind of started slowing down, and it's been on a downward slope since then. Because I guess people just are working so much to try to make it now, they don't have time to go out and use their stuff as much as they did at one time. But it's just the way it is right now. So I don't know if it'll pick back up or not. I think it'll be better for us, honestly, for makers, knife makers, and smaller companies, because those people usually have a cult-like following anyways. And I just think the bigger manufacturers will probably take the bigger hits, like the companies that produce way more, because those are the fans of shows and things like that are seeing that buy into that because they see somebody else using them. But the guys that actually use the stuff and actually like and enjoy knives, they're always going to be around. So
yeah. Well, and part of me thinks that survival, bushcraft, and knives became a hobby almost like yo-yos or longboards.
Yeah.
But it had more staying power because men want to be men. So you would see guys online in knife groups just waxing poetic about which survival knife or combat knife you should choose. People will get up into arguments in the comments section over which fighting knife is the best knife. And you can have hundreds of comments, and not a single one of them has ever fought with a knife. And 99% of the knives that people share pictures of, they've shared that same picture 600 times, and they've never used the knife at all. And so that goes, knives became like part of a status symbol. As the economy gets tougher, a lot of that's going to go away. A lot of that's going to be devalued. A lot of people will be buying less knives. And a lot of the people that never use the knives at all anyways, it's going to be one of the first things to go. But it will still have more staying power because it is still a tool, and it is still a little bit primal, right? So it'll be interesting to see. I see unique challenges for our big production guys. Potentially, I see unique challenges for our custom makers. I see a really golden opportunity for me to buy a really sweet 2x72 grinder for cheap pretty soon.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet there's going to be a lot of knife makers that are selling off a lot of their equipment too.
So, yeah, I don't know. But I do hope, I think they're talking about 158 people potentially losing their jobs. That is absolutely a bummer, no matter what. And for me, regardless of anything else, the best case scenario is nothing happens. They find a way to be profitable or whatever.
I mean, I have heard a lot of people speaking just on the internet stuff about where they're located as well. I mean, I think they're in New York, right? So they're talking about how hard it would be to operate in New York State right now because of the taxes and everything else that's involved in that. And it's a massive undertaking for some company like that to move somewhere else. So I don't know if they would ever, if that would benefit them or not. I don't know if they even would. There's a lot of history there. I think the company as a whole is over 100 and something years old. So for them to move, it'd kind of be like the ones that do what's the knife company that does the Old Hickory knives and stuff? Ontario, yeah. I mean, it's the same thing kind of with them. I mean, they've been there so long. I mean, the history there that they just wouldn't have ever moved to try to, restart somewhere else. So, I mean, we'll see. But New York is a pretty liberal state. It's pretty hard to operate in some of those conditions probably. And I also mentioned, too, I mean, it could be something to do with some type of steel union or something that they raise their wages and then the company just can't handle it. Because, I mean, a lot of these places are operating on really thin profit margins in the first place. So, I mean, we'll just see. But we really hate to see, a company like that go down after they've been, it's like a lot of the gun companies that we've always loved and stuff that were over 100 years old. They're basically just a shell of themselves anymore because somebody bought them out. They're just using their likeness or name now. So I hope it doesn't turn into that. I hope that Crucible could still stay going, but we'll see. I mean,
and you mentioned that and unions and stuff like that, and I talked quite a bit to the guys at Crucible at Blade Show. I talked to Bob at Niagara Specialty Metals because of the whole Survive fiasco, which continues to just continually leave a more and more sour taste in my mouth. But
I'm going to tell you guys my opinion on Survive real quick. I thought that they had the entire knife industry by the nuts, actually. You know, like they had the best knife that was made, and they just completely ruined it. So, like, feel bad for that. But I mean, I thought they were doing really good, and then all these other companies came in and just made something that was comparable or better, and it was just, you know, it was really sad too.
Yeah. Well, like, Survive can't exist in a market of White River Knife and Tool and Lion Steel, Reef.
All these other companies have picked up their slack, and I mean, they're comparable or better. You know, I mean, it's a classic. I mean, the same thing could be happening with Crucible. They could have bad management. It's the same thing that happened with Survive. I mean, that guy had really good ideas. He made a really good knife, but he couldn't keep it between the ditches. So who knows? I mean, Crucible had filed bankruptcy in the early 2000s, and I mean, once somebody does that, it's kind of hard for them to get out. So.
Oh, but what I was going to say is, like, at Blade Show, I was talking to these guys. None of them are rolling up in Lambos.
Yeah.
Talking about their third yacht house. You know, they were working class, blue collar guys, and so hopefully it's not any, I don't know, not any issues like that. I don't know. You know, I think we're just it has, a part of it has to be where we're at with inflation and the economy in general, and what sucks is, not to go too deep into supply and demand and all of this, but excuse me, as your cost of doing business goes up, your prices go up. You go out, and what used to be a $200 knife literally 2 to 3 years ago is now a $400 knife. Simultaneously, your average buyer is getting tighter and tighter with inflation, has less and less money, so you have less and less buyers. So your demand is going down, so you can't produce as much, so you need a larger profit margin on every item sold to be able to stay in business, because you still have all of your manufacturing costs regardless, and that makes prices go up even more, which gets more people out of the market. Inflation continues to rise, cost of doing business continues to rise, your materials get more and more expensive, so you get this spiral, and prices go up and customers go down, and that can really hurt the industry when it comes to being a guy trying to make a living grinding out knives or running a large production company. However, a lot of these things are self-regulating as well. So if the market is oversaturated right now, this could be the way that the market self-corrects. We'll just have to see. It's interesting. It's you know, Ross, if you had said you thought that this might happen to me a month ago, I'd be like, what? No way. Their name's on everything. Mm-hmm. But here we are.
Yeah, I mean, to look at every single, I told him earlier to look like, I'm probably off on this, but you look at like 90%. I told him earlier, I said like 98% of everything that's made is a CPM steel. So you look at this and you're like, well, how could this company has its hand in every single knife manufacturer's knives, like how could this happen to them? They're killing it. I mean, I don't know. We don't know. None of us know except for the people there. So,
well, actually, with that being said, I genuinely hate to bring this up again, but Survive. If a company doesn't charge enough, if they're cutting those profit margins too thin, if that's why we see their brand on everything, because that's what they're trying to do, and they're cutting those profit margins as thin as possible to make that possible, you know, they might, bottom line, have not made enough money. And so it's really crazy to me It's been crazy to me to hear people for years now complain about the prices of knives, especially when it comes to higher quality knives. Not just White River, who in my opinion has been one of the absolute leaders in value since they've been around, but even like TRC knives are a lot more expensive. But when you know what you look at and you look at what goes into them, and they're made in flipping Lithuania, what we're actually paying is pretty amazing. It's a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
But it's pretty amazing, and so what we'll see is all of the people that have been complaining about prices for the past 5 or 10 years or whatever will now have even less opportunity if things spiral down, where it's even less opportunity to own a really nice knife than they had before.
Well, I mean, things are going up for makers. I mean, I was complaining the other day on Facebook about how much my liquid nitrogen had went up. I mean, a couple years ago, I've got a 35-liter DWAR. That's the container that holds liquid nitrogen. I think I paid like $120 to get that filled. And the guy that fills it, air gas people, a lot of people don't like air gas, but the guy that fills it gives me a deal and, cuts some of the cost off. But if I was to pay full price, it'd be $178 to fill that tank now. And that's within 5 to 7 years, somewhere in there is how much it's went up. So, it's going up. I paid $140 for this one, I think, for that to go up. And then for me to do high-end CPM or powder metallurgy steels or stainless steels and things like that, you have to have liquid nitrogen or dry ice, which I can't get that around here. I mean, things like that have just went up, and it's just part of it. And maybe there's something to do with the steelmaking industry that's gone up to the point where it's become, less feasible for them to make stuff like that for knife steel. I don't know, but it's just the world that we're living in right now, and the cost is going to go up on a lot of things, and that sucks, but it's just part of it. And the people that want to have the knives are going to get them regardless. I mean, if you want something, you're willing to pay for something good, you're going to pay extra for it. But I think a lot of the more like hobbyist people that are into knives and things are going to, like we said, kind of fall to the wayside and not buy anymore because it's just getting too expensive. But we'll see. I really hope that the fanatics stick around and keep buying stuff, and I really hope that companies like this keep producing really cool new stuff. And, like people like Larry and Thomas come up with something new every now and then for us, because it's really interesting. A lot of people buy stuff just because it's new and it's cool, and there's not a lot of new and cool in this industry. So I hope that continues with Crucible or somebody else. I mean, we'll see.
We'll see. Well, Ross, thank you for being on Behind the Edge podcast. Again, guys, please check out the links in the description box below. If you are a fellow knife nerd, those links down there are for you. Let's keep what we can of this alive here and moving forward, at least for the people that are truly passionate about the industry, which we certainly are. Again, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you in the comment section below.